What's going on, everyone? In today's episode, we're going to talk about the one nutrient, the singular nutrient that every gardener probably has enough of in their garden. Their plants are probably not deficient of, but yet most gardeners think they're deficient of. Let's go. And that one nutrient is calcium. If I had $1 for every time I heard a gardener think they didn't have enough calcium because their tomatoes had blossom end rot, or their peppers or zucchinis had blossom end rot, or maybe their plants just they didn't look like they had enough calcium. I don't know what that look is, but maybe they just looked like they didn't have enough. I'd be rich. I don't even think I'd need to work. I just would retire and go jet set off and drink Mai Tais on a beach somewhere. It's the number one nutrient that everyone thinks they're deficient in. And it's crazy. Now, granted, having more of it is a good thing. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm talking about deficiency, which is not enough. You can add more and be fine. Your plants are only going to take up so much. But deficiency is a whole different ballgame. Deficiency is the plants not having enough to grow and survive and to produce fruit. Now, we're going to talk all about why your plants, probably 90 to 95% of you, do not have a calcium deficiency in any way, shape, or form, and probably never will for the foreseeable future if you're doing the right things. We're going to talk about how to do the right things so you never have a calcium deficiency, but we're also going to talk about why you probably don't have a calcium deficiency right now as a gardener. Now, we're going to be planting out some of this garden here, and we're going to be jumping around because, you see, fertilizer is kind of a touchy subject. A lot of gardeners, they try to fertilize as little as possible. They're hyper-focused on what they're fertilizing with. And a lot of gardeners don't realize that most of their soil contains a lot of the fertilizer necessary to grow plants, compost. Now, if you're using compost to grow in, compost is a growing medium, but it also has nutrients in it. That's because compost is essentially broken down organic material. Whatever you were degrading, whether that be straw, grass clippings, food scraps, horse manure, cow manure, any type of animal manure, it doesn't matter. You could be wood chips broken down. That decomposition process yields a growing medium, but also a gentle fertilizer. Now, I am, again, not talking about fertilizing in the sense of supplemental fertilizer. We use Trifecta Plus. We're going to continue to use Trifecta Plus. It's the #1 fertilizer that we recommend. We make it, we manufacture it, and we use it in all of our plants for good reason. But it's not the only fertilizer that you can rely on to grow your garden, and it shouldn't be. It's a supplemental fertilizer, but it's not the only fertilizer. Compost is a great fertilizer. It's a very gentle fertilizer, but anything that was previously grown or was living at one point that was then degraded and broken down, the nutrients are then released for your plants to take up. And that's really where the story of calcium comes into play. All living things require calcium. Your bones are made up of calcium. Plants are made up of even more calcium. That's because the cell structure that makes up a leaf is essentially the bones of a leaf. You see, leaves don't have a skeleton like you and I do. What keeps them upright and what keeps them continuing to grow is calcium. That's what makes up the cell wall of all plants. So whether you're breaking down wood chips like this, grass clippings, or weeds like this, or even paper products like cardboard or this toilet paper, or even food scraps from your kitchen, anything that was once living is broken down becomes compost. And this compost contains all of the nutrients from what once made it up, from what it once came from. Now, yes, it is true that all compost is different. Not all compost is going to be created equal. Some compost, depending on what made it up, is going to be higher in certain nutrients or might need other nutrients. But the one nutrient that is irrefutable is calcium. Calcium will be found in all forms of compost in adequate amounts for your plants. And the great thing is that even if you're growing in native soil, just topsoil, there have been enough plants living and decaying and living and decaying and breaking down year after year then unless you're growing in pure sand or gravel or something that has very little calcium, very little plant life, there's probably enough calcium for at least a couple growing seasons. And that's because calcium is the building block of all life. Yes, you can talk about nitrogen. Yes, you could talk about phosphorus. Yes, you could talk about potassium. But calcium is one that I think is talked more frequently than any other nutrient, yet it's the most prevalent. Now, it's not the most prevalent in the sense of like quantity. There's more nitrogen than there is calcium. However, we're talking about available calcium for your plants to uptake. That's really where I wanted to make a distinction, because calcium is abundant. And why is it abundant? Well, primarily because it's not always water soluble. Very little of it is actually water soluble. So nitrogen, for instance, this compost pile, if we left it out, rain would wash nitrogen from the soil. The grass surrounding it would be beautiful and green. It probably would wash some phosphorus away, some potassium away, those water-soluble nutrients and minerals, but it's going to wash very little calcium away. And that's because calcium, it's a lot different how it's structured. It doesn't readily dissolve into water. That means it's basically here until it's ready to be used. So why is it that so many gardeners are worried about their calcium levels? Well, the first thing is it's a really popular talking point. I can't tell you how often I hear gardeners say, I've got blossom end rot, what's wrong? And they say, you have a calcium deficiency, and they stop there. Yes, blossom end rot is in fact a calcium deficiency, but the fine print is that it's oftentimes a calcium deficiency in the plant, not the soil. That's kind of a case of where people have the right information, but they're explaining it wrong, and it causes a kind of a misinterpretation of the information, leading to a lot of people doing the wrong thing or thinking the wrong thing. And then that has a spillover effect where they're teaching other people and they're regurgitating that information to other people. And it's not necessarily wrong or malicious. It's just, it's not fully right. And that's, I guess, the biggest problem. You see, a calcium deficiency in your plant is vastly different than a calcium deficiency in your soil. If you're growing with compost, you should have ample amounts of calcium. If you are replenishing every single year, as you should as a gardener, that's going to continue to allow for fresh calcium to be amended into your soil. You could also amend your soil with something like dolomitic lime in small quantities. You could also apply something like gypsum. Gypsum's a great calcium additive. I also see a lot of people advocating for using eggshells and bone meal. All great. Bone meal and eggshells can take a little bit longer to break down simply because the calcium is not fully broken down and plant available yet, but great additives all around. It's going to ensure there's plenty of calcium, but by far the best way to ensure you have enough calcium in your soil is simply by using compost. It's readily available. Anyone can make it at their house, or you could buy it inexpensively, and whether it's bagged or from a compost facility, compost is compost if it's been broken down from organic material. It doesn't matter the source, because even if it's wood chips, the wood had calcium. Even if it's grass clippings, the grass clippings had calcium. You're not looking at those other nutrients, which are maybe a little more nuanced. Calcium is so abundant, and it's probably in all of them in plenty of adequate quantities to get the results you're looking for in your garden. Where it comes short though, where the calcium can become depleted, is if you're growing in a soil that is inert, like peat moss or coco coir. If you're growing in an alternative growing medium other than compost, you may want to supplement with some calcium or a fertilizer that has calcium in it, simply because you want to make sure that you add that, because it will not be found in tons of plant available amounts in those soils. As that stuff breaks down, sure, peat moss will eventually lead to calcium because it's a plant. Coco coir will eventually lead to calcium because it was part of a plant, but until they break down, there's not very little calcium. So you do want to add some supplemental calcium in those cases. And that's why I said at the beginning of this video, probably 90 to 95% of gardeners have enough calcium. It's the 5 to 10% that are growing with exclusively peat moss and nothing else, or exclusively coco coir and nothing else. Those people could use some supplemental calcium. But why is it that plants have a hard time taking up calcium even when it's in the soil. Now, where a lot of gardeners get this idea that their soil is deficient in calcium usually surrounds tomatoes, and that has to do with blossom end rot. Now, tomatoes are not the only plant that can get blossom end rot. You have peppers, zucchinis, eggplants. A lot of different plants can get blossom end rot. And tomatoes are probably the most popular because it's the most popular crop grown by home gardeners. And when you get blossom end rot, it is caused from a calcium deficiency. And as I said, it's not wrong, but it's not completely right. The calcium deficiency starts in the plant, and it usually is not because there's enough calcium in the soil. There's plenty of that, as we've talked about. It's because of inconsistent watering. That's because calcium is basically trapped. It needs a vessel. It needs a way to move. And that's because plants, as they're growing, will uptake the amount of calcium they need to store in new cells. As we talked about, calcium is the bones of a plant. That means for every new leaf, for every flower, every fruit, it requires calcium. And that new calcium is sent from a signal. That new plant, that new growth, sends a signal down to the roots, and the roots say, I need 1 order of calcium. Sends the calcium up. But if there's no water, calcium cannot be taken up. And so you will have a calcium deficiency in a presence of a lack of water. And gardeners will sometimes have a placebo effect where they will add eggshells, or they'll fertilize, or they'll give their plants lots of gypsum, or whatever type of calcium supplement. There's CalMag, which is calcium and magnesium, all great for additional calcium. Additional calcium is wonderful, don't get me wrong. And there's a time and a place for it. But we're talking about just keeping your plants alive and happy and healthy, and not going for crazy, super insane results, just having a good garden and having a good time. There's enough calcium. But the inconsistent watering causes there to be a calcium deficiency because the plants can't get the calcium that they need. And they'll add that, and then it'll rain, or they'll water, and then over time, the blossom end rot will the old tomatoes will stay blossom end rot stricken, but the new tomatoes won't. And they'll say, oh, my calcium is working. It was a calcium deficiency. And in rare cases, that might be true. But in most cases, it's because the watering got back on a regular schedule, or was a little more consistent, and it caused the tomatoes to no longer have blossom end rot because they were getting the calcium from the soil that was already there to begin with. And that is the real meat and potatoes of this episode. It's not to say you shouldn't or can't fertilize with calcium. It's not to say that you shouldn't add eggshells to your garden. That's not to say that you're wasting your time at all. It's simply to better educate you on how your plants grow, so you better understand why you're doing something. Why are you fertilizing, right? Are you fertilizing because something, or is there another underlying problem that can teach you how to become a better gardener? That's really the whole reason for this video. Blossom end rot is something that happens. It'll even happen to me, probably even this year. It is very common, and it will happen. But it does not mean that you need more calcium. It just means you need to dial in your watering schedule and keep things a little more consistent. If your plants are going super dry for a long period of time, you're more likely to see blossom end rot on those newer fruits. Blossom end rot is a pretty quick to diagnose thing because it's very evident. It's not like a nitrogen deficiency that takes a lot of time for the plant to start using up those nitrogen levels. It's either it's there or it's not. And that's what causes a lot of gardeners to think they've cured the problem, because it's so fast to fix as well. It's fast to show itself and it's fast to fix. And so a lot of gardeners just misdiagnose their plants and they spread that information around. So in summary, compost, compost, compost. Grow with compost. You'll never have a calcium deficiency. If you want to add more calcium after that, great. But do not think that just because you have blossom end rot, you have a calcium deficiency. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you all learned something new. I'm gonna get out of the sun because it's a scorcher today. I hope you guys are staying hydrated, staying cool, having a great time in your garden. And I really do hope that this video helped. So as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger, and we'll catch you all later. See ya, bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you for your viewership, because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting MIgardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care. Bye.